Hello and welcome to this week's Catechism Revo in Catechism question and answer number 12. What special act of providence did God exercise toward man in the estate wherein he was created? When God had created man, he entered into a covenant of life with him, upon condition of perfect obedience, forbidding him to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, upon the pain of death. Everyone knows the story of Adam and Eve in the garden. We're getting a little bit deeper into that story, and we remember from question 11, we learned about the providence of God. And the providence of God is God preserving and governing all his creatures and all their actions. Well, today we're talking about a special act of providence. How God chose to govern and relate with not all creatures, but men and women, different than any other creature. And the way that God chose to relate with mankind was through covenant. Covenant. A covenant is an agreement or a promise made between two parties. Sometimes they are equal parties. In the case of the Bible, they are obviously not equal parties. It is between God the Creator and mankind, his creation. So all of mankind, ever since the beginning, this is us as a species, not a nation, Israel, not the church, us as a species, we relate with God within the dynamics and the structure of a covenant. And this is so important for us to understand because, we all want to know God. We want to relate with God. We want to feel him. We want to sense him. And the Bible teaches us that the way that we do this is within the context of this covenantal relationship. And think about covenant. It's actually quite practical. We engage in our relationships on the basis of covenant. We structure them by covenant, whether they're formal or informal. Think about your relationship with the country in which you are a citizen. That is a formal covenantal relationship. And your standing in your country is based on whether you will adhere to a certain set of rules or laws. Think about your relationship with a restaurant. Your favorite restaurant, Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, McDonald's, whatever it is, and you have a covenantal relationship with them, meaning you're going in there and you are exchanging some sort of goods and expecting some product to be delivered to you, to fulfill you, to satisfy you. You need that product to be of a certain quality. That, in a way, is a covenantal relationship. Think about relationship with your friends, and you have a set of expectations. And there are benefits that you get from the friendship, and there are boundaries that should not be crossed. And if those boundaries are crossed, there are punishments, there are consequences. So our relationship with God is based on God first creating us and entering into a covenant with us. And these were based on certain conditions. The conditions were perfect obedience to his will. What did that look like for Adam and Eve in the garden? Quite simple. That tree right there, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, do not eat from it. And there were blessings and curses. If you do not eat from it, and if you listen, you're going to be able to eat from the tree of life. But if you eat of that tree that I told you not to, God said, you shall surely die. You will surely die. Unfortunately, Adam was not able to hold up his end of the covenant. He ate from that fruit of the tree. And from that point on, no man or woman would be able to hold up their end of the covenant of perfect obedience before God. And so death entered the world. You shall surely die. This is the pain of death that the Catechism talks about. Death entered the world, and we're not just talking about physical death, we're talking about spiritual death. And we're going to get more into sin in our next catechism. And so this really points to our greatest need as humans. We need someone who will be faithful to hold up their end of the covenant. We need somebody who's able to meet these stipulations, to meet these requirements. Imagine in your relationship with a bank, if you owed a massive debt, millions of dollars, and there's just no way that you could pay that debt, and so you were in trouble. The only relief you would find is if somebody mediated and came into that and paid the price for you. paid that debt. And of course, all this is hinting towards our Redeemer. This is why Jesus Christ came, to fulfill that end of the covenant that we could not fulfill. So one thing we might consider in all this is thinking about what you believe about creation. Have you ever questioned if Adam, Eve, the serpent, garden, if all that actually happened? And this is foundational. In our understanding of how God relates with us, we find truth in how he related to Adam, the actual historical man Adam. So we need to really staunchly hold to the historicity of the Genesis account, that all this actually did happen. And then we think also about covenant, and maybe you can reflect on how some ways you see this covenant principle being played out in your own relationships with your family members, your friends, your schools, your jobs, your pets even, and how you also relate covenantally with God. What are some ways that you think in terms of how my relationship with God is an exchange of covenant responsibilities and duties, and then how that causes you to really need Jesus Christ to be your covenant mediator because of all the ways that you fall short, that I fall short.